One. Hi, this is Bruce Rawles. I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan, and as usual, we're talking about A Course in Miracles. For today, Susan suggested the topic of how is healing accomplished, which is section 5 in the Manual for Teachers. And we were both commenting before we started the recording how appropriate this is, having just reread it. And I think it maybe just, kind of the process of the more you study and apply, the more you realize the depth that the material really covers. And yeah, so anyway, great topic. Any opening comments?
Well, I guess so, a little bit. The reason that I'm focused on the manual is because I've been teaching it in my Tuesday night class. We're going through the Manual for Teachers, and this is our topic for next week. But it just, the manual itself really focuses on the theme of, we become a teacher of God by somewhere with it in our experience finally at the level of the mind, recognizing that we share the same interest in healing our mind about the, the terrible conflict that we seem to be in. That's about all we're aware of when we first have that recognition that brought Helen and Bill really to the Course, that there has to be a better way of relating to each other here. So really we share the interest, we share the same decision-making mind. We're not aware that we're a mind. We think that we're these personal selves, but in truth, at the level of the mind, which is the only level that's actually true, all of this is really happening within the mind. But we're dreaming a dream otherwise, that we're these personal selves, these bodies apart from God, that the separation really happened, and we had to escape into a world of bodies that are, defending themselves against love's punishment for what they really did to God, right? But what that recognition that we have, that we share the interest of healing is really the idea, is really our opening to the journey of the Course, which is a journey from body to mind, which is a journey that is getting us to recognize that to take responsibility for our wish to keep dreaming, this dream of suffering, our identification with the body, and then to begin to recognize that we're the same, in that we share the same decision-making mind that has chosen the ego, that has chosen to identify with a personal self, that thinks it's a victim of the world that it sees. And we also share a part of our mind that we're not really very familiar with at all, which is the memory of God, the memory of wholeness in our mind, represented in the Course symbolized in the Course by Jesus, Holy Spirit. But really just that part of our one mind that remembered to smile at the tiny mad idea of separation and doesn't take it seriously and remains, the light outside the dream of our darkness, that is always, that we can bring our darkness to, that we can learn, we're learning that we have another teacher in our mind that we can change the purpose of our dream to, our seeming lives to, and to make them now a classroom of forgiveness in which we're looking with, we're learning to question our identification with the body, our defensiveness as it appears in the way that we believe that we're always unfairly treated by others, and to really question the cause of that and bring that cause back to where it really is, which is in the mind, a choice that we're making in the mind to defend this belief in separation. And through that process of forgiveness, through the process in which we're learning that that nothing outside us can really destroy our peace or our health or our mental health or our, nothing really is making me anxious or upset or sick or needy, and feeling this terrible lack. That process is really is what begins to heal the problem in the mind, which is my, the split mind, my belief that there's another part of, that there is an ego, that there is a personal self, that the separation really happened, and I now have to somehow prove that I exist apart from God, but it's not my fault, by pointing the finger all the time at other bodies, whether they're microorganisms or other people in my personal life, or they're people that seem to be our leaders, or they're people, my neighbors, or my family of origin, wherever we're placing the blame for whatever we're feeling, or discontent or physical or emotional that we're feeling. That's really what needs healing in the mind, and that's what the Course is talking about. So
Yeah. What you said. Well stated, yes. As usual, thank you.
And
Yeah.
that's a long
Yeah.
way of saying that it's reinforcing the idea in the manual of moving from separate interests to shared interests,
Right.
by changing the purpose of our lives from a classroom of separation realized and punishment coming all the time and deserved, only only more deserved in them, because look at what they're doing to me. I'm the relatively less guilty one here, and we're always trying to kind of compete to be the less guilty one. And so we need people to we need co-stars that seem to constantly be the problem for us and
Right.
creating our problems, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking. Yeah, I was just picturing like an announcer at a contest, and coming in at only 3 units of guilt compared to the 75 and 3 million. Is this today's winner? Such and such.
Right, or the Olympics where they hold up the numbers, right?
Exactly, exactly. But it's yeah,
Right,
it's all,
right,
anything comparative is usually a big tip off. We're dealing with the dualistic insanity of our
right,
ego mind, and it's not going to make us happy. It's
right,
nothing evil, sinful, or wicked about it, as Ken Wapnick loves to say, but it's just silly. It's just
right.
uh, um,
Right. And so
a
how
waste
is
of our time.
healing
Yeah,
accomplished? It's accomplished through this process of forgiveness, like
yeah,
everything else. And this healing
exactly.
is really, and the Song of Prayer pamphlet addresses a whole section in healing too. It's
Hmm.
not about the body again. It's about the mind. The body the body isn't sick because the body isn't. It isn't well. It just isn't.
Hmm.
And so so also, as we're reading through this, and I think we should read it through and comment on it.
Hmm.
The It's not really, it may sound like it's talking about healing, accomplishing healing of the body, but given the Course's metaphysics, that cannot be.
Right,
Because
right.
again, the body, it's healing our mind about the idea that we need a body to defend ourselves against love,
Hmm.
or to prove separation, or to prove, again, that I really exist at God's expense, but it's not my fault.
Yeah, there's a couple of premises that I always try to remember when I pick up the blue book, and one is it's always and only about the mind. And then one of the more challenging ideas in the Course is there is no world. This is the central thought the Course
Oh
attempts to
yeah,
teach. And if I can remember those, and probably a lot of others, but those come to mind as two cornerstone ideas, then as we read through this, it kind of it makes so much more sense, and applies so much more deeply. So shall I start reading?
sure.
Okay, so this is again section 5 from the Manual for Teachers of A Course in Miracles, and the title is How is Healing Accomplished? It begins with an opening statement. Healing involves an understanding of what the illusion of sickness is for. Healing is impossible without this. And the first section is the perceived purpose of sickness. Healing is accomplished the instant the sufferer no longer sees any value in pain. Wow, we could probably stop right there. And
Right,
if we meditated on that throughout the day and recognize how many moments during the day we're, you know, making a list of grievances and imagined insults and injuries and slights that offend the separate self
right,
we think we are, and the pain that incurs. Like you say, we exist apart from perfect oneness, and it's not my fault. That's the whole premise of the ego's insanity, isn't it? Yeah.
right. And letting this destroy my peace, right? Letting this this situation with the virus destroy my peace, or this situation, my husband is driving me crazy right now with his sort of cavalier attitude towards sanitizing things that he brings in the house, and he's coming and going all the time. And so I'll feel completely peaceful because I've gotten everything under control from my perspective in terms of making us safe. And then he comes in and destroys it. And from my perspective, that's what's happening all the time. It's the infection walks through the door. It doesn't care about me. So, and it doesn't matter how long we have, and of course you can be peaceful. It's not true. He's not throwing my peace away. I can be peaceful regardless of the fact that we, have different approaches to this, and still go about doing what I need to do and sanitizing without taking it so personally. But, I usually take it personally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Just like you say, to watch and notice how often we do take things personally, and of course the whole focus of that is that there has to be a person to take things personally, and to experience pain, whether it's a mental concept of a self or a physical one, or both. That they're kind of intertwined in the ego's it's silly thought system of separation, right?
Right.
But we have to look at it where we think we're at. So
yep.
I'll continue. Who would choose
we value pain. We value that pain. I mean, I keep doing
absolutely.
it. I keep
Absolutely.
going for it. It makes me real. It makes. Yep.
Yeah. Completely, anchors and solidifies and validates the individual that has that pain. Yeah.
Yep.
Who would choose suffering unless he thought it brought him something, and something of value to him? He must think it is a small price to pay for something of greater worth. For sickness is an election, a decision. It is the choice of weakness in the mistaken conviction that it is strength. When this occurs, real strength is seen as threat and health as danger. Sickness is a method conceived in madness for placing God's Son on his Father's throne. God is seen as outside, fierce and powerful, eager to keep all power for himself. Only by his death can he be conquered by his Son. And of course, that harkens back to the authority problem that's described in detail earlier in the text. Of Course in
We
Miracles.
usurped God's power, and we, overthrew the kingdom, right? And now, sickness again is part of that secret plan that we made to portray ourselves as the less guilty one, right? And so, we're hoping for God's mercy.
Yeah.
Look at my relative innocence. Look at what they're doing to me.
Exactly. So within our prodigal dreams as separate selves, silly seemingly separate selves,
right.
there's this idea that the ego's lowercase g God is going to be upset because we jumped on the throne and pushed him off and said, okay, I'm taking over here because you're not recognizing my separate self. And so in order to keep that intact, I've got to push God out because God doesn't acknowledge that. And so we've got to, and now we're whether consciously or unconsciously fearing that fierce retaliation of the ego's God, thinking that, okay, now we're in big trouble.
Yeah, right.
And so in order to maintain that, we make the preemptive strike, to punish ourselves, which is completely insane.
I'll take care of it. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Want to read the next paragraph?
Yep. And and I'm going to read it, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And what in this insane conviction does healing stand for? It symbolizes the defeat of God's Son and the triumph of his Father over him. It represents the ultimate defiance in a direct form which the Son of God is forced to recognize. It stands for all that he would hide from himself to protect his, quote, life. If he is healed, he is responsible for his thoughts. And of course, we forgot that we made this up. The whole idea was to deny responsibility for this and to make it dependent on God, right? And then through that, to reflect that damaged relationship that we have with God on each other. Right.
Yeah. That way we've got visible evidence that the scapegoat is not here.
Right.
And, you know,
And let's let's find special relationships that we can play this out with, and which is what we do.
yeah.
So if he is healed, he is responsible for his thoughts. And if he is responsible for his thoughts, he will be killed to prove to him how weak and pitiful he is. But if he chooses death himself, his weakness is his strength. Now has he given himself what God would give to him, and thus entirely usurped the throne of his creator, which is what we were just talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The preemptive strike that we make to avoid God's punishment. We think, oh, well, I'll get off a little easier by doing it
Right.
myself, and don't
And
worry about it, God.
right. And
You go,
that's the
God.
price. That's the price of separation, which really happened. And
Yeah.
so, at least I get to, have this life for a while, and then, and then eventually it comes, right? The punishment that I deserve is coming, which proves that I exist and I'm not a mind, because we're more terrified of the mind. That's where we think the real punishment of the real God is,
Yeah.
right, for what we really did. So it's much better to play out this fantasy, and in which we think that at least sometimes I'll have some pleasure here, I'll have some health here, right?
Right.
So
So the next section 2, the shift in perception. Healing must occur in exact proportion to which the valuelessness of sickness is recognized. One need but say, there is no gain at all to me in this, and he is healed. Another very simple declaration. Huh?
not coming though.
Yeah. But to say this, one first must recognize certain facts. First, it is obvious that decisions are of the mind, not of the body. If sickness is but a faulty problem-solving approach, it is a decision. And it is a and if it is a decision, it is the mind and not the body that makes it. The resistance to recognizing this is enormous, because the existence of the world as you perceive it depends on the body being the decision maker. Terms like, quote, instincts, unquote, quote, reflexes, unquote, and the like represent attempts to endow the body with non-mental motivators. Actually, such terms merely state or describe the problem. They do not answer it. And I'm reminded of one of our favorite quotes from our beloved Ken Wapnick, which is, the ego is just a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem.
Yep. It's a
Until
faulty problem-solving approach, right? It doesn't
exactly.
it's trying to solve the problem of guilt in the mind through, through something that's really through torture,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? Which doesn't work, and the guilt never goes away. It never. We go to our grave with the guilt, right? Because all we've been doing is nourishing it through trying to make the body real, trying to make the dream real.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, yeah. And so the resistance to that is so enormous, because it keeps the idea, guilt is is what keeps the idea of me going, the idea of the world going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're afraid of the alternative. We've forgotten that the alternative is really peace and love, not annihilation. So the acceptance of sickness as a decision of the mind for a purpose for which it would use the body is the basis of healing. So, and that's really the hardest part of the course, isn't it? Of, I'm choosing this.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening because I'm at some level, and it's not I'm Susan, but this decision-making mind outside of time and space that's animating this idea of Susan and Bruce is what's choosing to have this experience, and it's choosing it. There's a method to the madness. Again, it's trying to support this maladaptive solution to the problem of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, in fact, as I was reading this, I was thinking, one could simply substitute guilt or separation for sickness as we're reading along,
Absolutely.
and it works
Anxiety.
all that.
terror, anger, addiction,
Yep.
right? Loneliness.
All
Yep.
that. Yeah.
So, and this is so for healing in all forms. A patient decides that this is so and he recovers. If he decides against recovery, he will not be healed. Who is the physician? Only the mind, only the decision-making mind of the patient himself. The outcome is what he decides that it is. Special agents seem to be ministering to him, yet they but give form to his own choice. And that's all the magic that we use, what the Course calls magic, to our medicines and our, health practices and dietary choices and all the things that we use as remedies for the body, right?
And that also kind of alludes to the general idea that the world itself is completely magic when left to the ego's devices, because if we're not upset for the reason we think, then that basically removes the world and everything in it from the equation.
Right.
And that's the ultimate conclusion of studying the Course, that no, it couldn't possibly be anything outside me that is the problem.
Right. Exactly. So so he chooses them he chooses these remedies in order to bring tangible form to his desires. And it is this they do and nothing else. They are not actually needed at all. The patient could merely rise up without their aid and say, I have no use for this. There is no form of sickness that would not be cured at once. But again, it's not really talking about it. We use these remedies because we're afraid of the power of the mind to choose, to choose not to identify with guilt. But it's not really talking about healing, like rising up from your wheelchair or something like that. It's really, because again, the body isn't sick, the body isn't well, the body is nothing. It's removing our belief that the body means anything at all, and that the body can really affect the mind. So the body may appear to still be unwell or suffering, but the pain of the body, if we're not identified with the body, that has no power whatsoever to destroy the peace in the mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think we've had moments, like this. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue with this, because there are times when, we have experienced that.
Absolutely.
And then that kind of builds and reinforces. And then we start to generalize and realize, wait a minute, I had an extended period of peace for maybe 5 or 10 seconds here.
Right. Right. No matter
And I wasn't identified with this silly body thing.
That's not to say that this isn't very difficult. The body seems to be real.
Oh yeah.
Of course, it's not saying at all not to use the remedies that
Exactly.
would that would be kind and seem to relieve the symptoms of the body. That would be in fact it cautions against doing that. It calls that a particularly unworthy form of denial.
Exactly.
So so as long as we believe we're bodies, we still have to take care of our bodies and be kind to try to again, really just change the purpose of it to a classroom of forgiveness, and be willing to at least question, the cause of what's really happening, and to look at it gently with Jesus.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, you want to read the next one?
Sure. What is the single requisite for this shift in perception? It is simply this: the recognition that sickness is of the mind and has nothing to do with the body. What does this recognition cost, in quotes? It costs the whole world you see, for the world will never again appear to rule the mind. Well, it really costs the suffering in the world.
Right.
It's not like the world is going to disappear and
we're not going to be hurled into heaven, right? We're told.
Blinking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like what Tim Wise says about that. He says, the world isn't going to go peace, or go poof before it'll go peace a long time before it goes poof. Yeah. I think that's really a helpful idea. It's like, we're going to be a whole lot more peaceful long before, we need to even consider the idea of it just winking out altogether. Yeah.
Right. We could go through the situation that we're all in right now without anxiety.
Yeah.
At the top of the ladder, when the guilt in the mind is healed, there's no reason to be anxious about this. But we're not at the top of the ladder.
No,
This is
no,
this is a
no.
class we're not anywhere near, and so we work with it and we
Exactly.
try to be gentle with ourselves. But it is where we're being led. The healing of the mind will lead us to peace, and that is unalterable by what all the mad, random craziness and assaults, seeming assaults of the world that we made up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It costs the whole world you see, for the world will never again appear to rule the mind. And like you say, at the top of the ladder, that's where we're headed. Yeah. For with this recognition is responsibility placed where it belongs, not with the world, but on him who looks on the world and sees it as it is not. He looks on what he chooses to see, no more and no less. The world does nothing to him. He only thought it did. Nor does he do anything to the world, because he was mistaken about what it is. Herein is the release from guilt and sickness both, for they are one. And that's what prompted me to, mention that equivalency, because it's like, oh, now we can go back and reread it. And like you're saying, put anything, any ego trait in there or characteristic, and
Right.
it all fits. Yeah. Yet to accept this release, the insignificance of the body must be an acceptable idea. And that's, like you say, that's why it's a slow curriculum where we slowly, begin to consider with more and more willingness that the body and the whole world, in fact, as a smokescreen for our mind, really is just a classroom to get back to the mind seen properly.
Right. And we're more and more, we're willing to at least question our the absolute nature of our reactions, the cause of our that we're attributing to our reactions.
Yeah.
And in so doing, we're opening our mind. We're turning away from the ego and opening to the healed perception of Jesus Holy Spirit, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
and then as you were saying earlier, we have those moments that we in which we have an experience that's outside of time and space, when what the Course calls the holy instant, where we're aware that it's kind of everything we really are looking for. And there's no me in it, and there's no need in it, and there's no fear in it, and there's no guilt in it, and everyone's included in it. And it's a relief, it's really what we want, but then we feel like, the earth is falling away beneath us, and so running back to get
Right.
spirit, right?
Exactly. In the Wizard of Oz metaphor, our inner Toto may pull the curtain back for a while, but ego was pretty quick to cover Oz back up with the curtain, fairly
Right,
quickly.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Because we don't like the idea that there's really not much going on there, and all the scary stuff in the world is really just a, a big show, intended to keep us mindless. Yeah.
And our habit of projecting has been so reinforced over such a long dream that it takes a really long time to form a new habit and to let the other habit go.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, really, this is in a sense, the whole practice of forgiveness is a kind of behavior modification, and not behavior modification, but mind modification, mind
Right.
training.
Right.
We're
Mental behavior modification.
mental behavior modification, where we're learning to make,
Yeah.
because it has nothing to do with behavior of the body, but
Right.
but really learning to make a different choice, and getting and to trust that choice, to learn that we can trust it. And it's the whole, the manual is about, begins with the characteristics of God's teachers, and the first one is the development of trust. And so, that's the journey. That's the development of trust is a process, and it can be a terrifying process at times, but it does end well.
Right. Right.
So
And it's always, I think, helpful to remember that the only terror is there because of our tenacity to what doesn't work.
our resistance and
Our
right.
resistance. Yeah, exactly. We fight it tooth and nail. And actually, a friend of mine, Dave, brought up we were sharing about this very topic the other day, and he brought up a Star Trek episode where there was this force field that the Enterprise was going through, and so I think it was Captain Picard, said, raise the shields, and then they, the bridge shook and everything as they went through this force field, and then they realized they had to go through it again. It was like another wave or something of it, and so put all the energy in the all the impulse and power of the engines of the Enterprise into the shields, and Data said, stop, hold on, drop the shields. and it was a great metaphor, because the idea being is that, okay, if we look at the resistance that we have and drop, doesn't mean like you've been sharing on the level of confusion arena, doesn't mean we don't do the magic, but if internally we recognize that the resistance and are willing to question that, that's really the dropping the shields that the Course is asking us to do, is to just to look at our inner defenses and say, I could see peace instead of this. I don't have to defend myself against what has no reality and truth. And sure, I'll take the aspirin or wear the mask, or do whatever is appropriate. But I don't have to make a big deal out of in my mind about this doesn't have to affect my peace. I could see peace instead of this. Yeah.
Right, and the first step of forgiveness too, of maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I'm not for the reason I think,
Yeah.
And just maybe. I mean, sometimes that's all we can do, Or even lately, I'm finding myself saying I must be wrong, even though I'm still really holding on to it. I'm still defending, I'm still doing the hell. But there's a part of my mind that, I at least remind myself, oh, I must be wrong. I must be wrong. I must be too afraid, and that's okay.
Yeah, so, it is. Yeah, I was doing that a bit earlier today myself.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Noticing how I was resisting the peace. Yeah. Okay. Let's
So the final
see.
paragraph, is that where we are?
I've got with this idea is pain forever gone. Is it?
Yeah, with this idea is pain forever gone. But with this idea goes also all confusion about creation and all confusion about what I am, right? I did not create myself. I'm still, I am as God created me. I'm one part of a mind, of one loving mind. Does not this follow of necessity? Place cause and effect in their true sequence in one respect, and the learning will generalize and transform the world. And again, it sort of collapses that hierarchy of illusions. There's one problem, one answer. And that's what this practice eventually leads us to. The transfer value of one true idea has no end or limit. The final outcome of this lesson is the remembrance of God. And that's at the top of the ladder, right? We open our eyes. What do guilt and sickness, pain, disaster, and all suffering mean now? Having no purpose, they are gone. And with them also go all effects they seemed to cause. So all of the strife and the pain and the anxiety and the craziness, right?
Yeah, I'm reminded of a phrase that I really find more and more helpful all the time, when it comes to looking at illusion, as the Course would describe it. It's sort of like waking up from a dream, and when you wake up from a dream, the specifics of the dream merely cease to seem to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And all the specific issues, and certainly at the core of that is the specific self that we, the silly, seemingly separate self that we think we are,
And of course,
just becomes irrelevant in truth. But we need that awareness to get back to the mind. We need all the specifics to get to the mind.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And along the way on the journey, we have those holy instants. We have those little tastes of what it is to be outside of the dream of time and space. And that's so, and it's such a relief.
Yeah.
And so that really, now we have a contrast to what we're doing most of the time, choosing the ego and the strife that it puts, how fraught that is all the time and how exhausting. And then, but we also have these moments where we can say, oh, this really is everything I want. So that builds on our trust.
Yeah,
So,
as you're sharing that, I was thinking of it, and I'm spouting off a lot of course cliches, but another favorite is, the strain of constant judgment is virtually intolerable. And I was
right,
thinking, well, everything that we do in the world that establishes a separate self and that makes me right at someone else's expense, and all the different forms of projection of the unconscious unfounded guilt really are judgments that we're living against ourselves,
yeah.
and reinforcing in a way that really just causes needless suffering. And I think that's what this section is, so much of the course is addressing, is just like, when are you going to stop doing this to yourself,
Oh, I
Bruce?
mean, we're beating ourselves up all the time. That's right.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
And with them also go out. So let me just reread that prior sentence.
sure.
Having no purpose, they are gone. So all of these illusions and projections on the body, and with them also go all the effects they seem to cause, all the suffering, right? Cause and effect, but replicate creation. Seen in their proper perspective, without distortion and without fear, they reestablish heaven. So again, it's all about purpose, right? If we're giving this a purpose of our lives, seeming lives here in the dream, the new purpose of forgiveness, giving the whatever seems to arise, the curriculum of my special problems and judgments, and the special relationships and all the things that seem to be destroying my peace. If I start to use them in a different way, toward healing my mind, then I will be led eventually to let them all go. It's really taking the cause back to the mind, taking responsibility for it back to the mind again. Um,
Exactly. It's a happy inevitability too, isn't it? When you say
right.
eventually, it's like, well, eventually we're all going to be returning to that place of peace in the mind where there's no conditions upon it being
Right.
placed by our resistance. Yeah.
And in truth, it was over long ago. I mean, we're
Yeah.
already there. So, I mean, when Jesus tells us that the end is sure, he's speaking from the present, and it's already over. We just keep dreaming this bad dream, keep replaying it, restreaming it,
An
right?
ancient movie that we keep
Yeah,
hitting the rewind and replay, the little 10-second rewind
right, right.
arrow. Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. So anyway, I think it's such, as course students, it's so helpful for us to try to look at those, in our fear as we're going through, seem to be going through this collectively in our dreams and personally in our dreams, of feeling such a high threat level to the body, to really, kind of go back and look at some of those passages kindly when you're ready. It can, and sometimes if you're in so much fear, you might want to wait a while.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
If
it's make
if
you
you're if
mad.
you're if you're freaked out
Yeah,
now, you might want to stop this video, right?
right. Yeah.
But eventually you may come back to it, or something
Right.
like this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, it was helpful to me, but again, I've been in terrible resistance at times, and really not wanting to look at this, but
Yeah.
you know, but it kind of was very appropriate that I had to teach it this week. So
Yeah, yeah. As you're sharing that, another metaphor that I find helpful lately is kind of imagining the ego's stream of grievances is like this scroll that every second there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, of these tiny little nothings that are added to the ledger of ego's grievances. And if we really paid attention to all of them, they would quickly fill up, volumes. And if it was on one continuous scroll, it would, quickly roll out the door and then go around the earth several times in a day, right?
right,
But in truth, all those grievances are nothing.
right,
And yet, if we start looking at them and see them as nothing, then it's not like they disappear overnight or anything. But when we stop investing in them, then it's just like meaningless gibberish instead of something that has tremendous meaning, because we've given it all the meaning that it has.
that's right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. And then we can just say, okay, that's like Saturn's rings. It's just a bunch of dust floating around and has had no impact on reality.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so thank you for indulging me on this one.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to, do you want to read the third section too, or?
Um, I think I'm going to stop there because
Okay, yeah, there, people can read that on their own. Yeah, but
yeah,
that's plenty for today.
I
Yes.
think that's plenty for today. Yep,
Yeah, yeah.
yep.
Very good. Well, yeah, always appreciate the conversations, and because they remind me of things that I need to practice.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Susan. And you can find Susan's writings, her witty, humorous, and eloquent writings on foraysandforgiveness.com. And I also recommend her books that are available there too as well. And I will also post this video as in addition to there on the videos page, also on acimblog.com.
Great,
So
thank you.
thank you. Look forward to the next conversation.
Okay, have a good one.
Likewise.
Stay well.
You too.
Bye bye.